Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain the action horror film called It Came from the Desert. Spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The movie begins with what seems like a ball of fire falling from the sky and crashing into the desert in New Mexico, leaving behind a humongous hole in the ground. The movie then fast forwards to 67 years later. Alarms are going off inside a hidden facility in the same desert. Armed men are running in fear, looking for a safe exit, while battling what seems like huge ants, bigger in size than all humans. Unfortunately, one by one, all of the men fall, and none of them make it out alive. The movie then cuts to two cowboys, Jorge and his pal, driving in their Nissan truck in the desert. They stop at the edge of a chasm and notice a tunnel at the bottom. They bring out their concrete trolley and venture into the tunnel to fetch any scrap copper they can find. The tunnel leads to a desolate facility called the Chicane Industries. As Jorge inspects the ground for metal, he is suddenly attacked by giant ants, sending his partner running back to the truck in fear. However, before he could reach the vehicle, the ants get to him. The movie then cuts to a guy named Brian, watching a movie called The Eradicator on his TV in his garage. In the TV film, a blonde girl is being attacked by a hideous monster and calls out for John Eradicator Cage, the male protagonist, for help. The Eradicator then shows up in a fancy sports bike. He sprays the green monster with bullets and rescues the girl like in any cheesy Hollywood movie. The two make out as Brian vicariously lives through the movie, imagining himself as the Eradicator. Brian is a nerdy university student who works part-time as a mechanic and repairs racing bikes. Brian's cool racer best friend Lucas then shows up and asks him to hurry up for a party. Brian and Lucas are excited for the party as the Eradicator himself is gracing the event and awarding Lucas his medal for winning his university's extreme sports bike race. As they load Lucas's sports bike on their pickup truck, a missing persons poster is seen on a nearby tree put up by the Chicane Industries. Instead of driving to the desert party, Lucas drives in the opposite direction, which leads to Brian's major crush, Lisa's home. Lucas reveals that he has invited her to the party without telling Brian. Brian freaks out and tells him to stop, but Lucas tells him that one day or another he will have to man up and express his feelings for her. Lisa goes to the same university as Brian and Lucas. She is not only beautiful and cool, she is smart, like Brian. After picking up Lisa, they head to the party, geeking out over the Eradicator franchise. Halfway to the party, the Guarisco brothers show up on their bikes. They flaunt their bike stunts, forcing Lucas to prove that he is no less. Lucas asks Brian to take over the steering wheel and jumps from the truck with his bike to show Tim and Craig Guarisco who the real boss is. The two brothers don't see eye to eye with Lucas and have a war of words with each other after reaching the party. Brian diffuses the situation and asks everyone to just enjoy the party. At the party, Lucas again encourages Brian to talk to Lisa, but Brian feels he doesn't have a cool personality and can't do daredevil stunts like Lucas. Lucas asks him to stop his pity party and suggests that he confidently ask her out, because that's what girls like. However, before Brian could even approach her, Craig and Tim start hitting on her, and Brian again loses hope. As Lucas gets busy on stage, thanking everyone for coming to his party, Brian wanders into the desert. While acknowledging Brian's major contribution in his victory, Lucas notices that Brian is missing from the crowd and goes looking for him. He finds him on the edge of the chasm. They both notice Jorge's abandoned truck on the other side of the chasm and the tunnel down below. Lucas forces Brian to come along with him to check out the tunnel. They come across the Chicane Industries facility, which Brian says is one of the biggest military contractors in the US. Afraid of getting shot, Brian advises against entering the private property, but Lucas doesn't heed his advice. As they inspect the elaborate military facility, Lisa comes looking for them by the chasm. Inside the desolate facility, Brian and Lucas come across a mess hall and kitchen with a refrigerator that is still cold and operating. They decide to go further into the facility and find a room labeled Batch 9. Inside, they find gooey liquids and webs. They suddenly hear strange sounds coming from outside. Frightened, Lucas finally decides to get the hell out of the facility. However, as they head for the exit, they come across a giant ant in the mess hall and quickly hide in the kitchen. Lucas gets a call from Lisa, and he tells her that they are stuck in the facility with a giant ant. He manages to ask her to come down to the tunnel and help them before his phone dies. With no choice other than to fight, they arm themselves with Wait for it, a takoyaki pan and grill spatula. They're going to stir-fry that bastard. The ant eventually finds them in the kitchen, and their weapons prove to be useless. The two buddies run to the mess, but the ant jumps over them and blocks their exit. It corners Lucas, but Brian bravely saves his friend by luring the ant towards himself. He then slides towards the exit, but the ant again jumps over him and blocks him from running away. Brian hits the button next to the exit, and the gate begins to close. However, the ant grabs him and tries to pull him towards itself. Lucas rushes towards his friend and tries to pull him out, but the ant starts pulling both of them towards itself. The two guys almost resign, but suddenly Lisa appears on the other side and starts hammering the ant, eventually killing the monster. Lucas celebrates the victory, while Lisa speculates that more such ants could attack them, as wounded ants emit alarm pheromones that send nearby ants into an attack frenzy and attract more ants from farther away. I wonder if Lisa had an explanation for the ant jumping. Lisa's prophecy quickly comes true, and more ants arrive from outside, forcing them to go deeper into the facility and hide. They realize that they are in some sort of control room. Suddenly, a video starts to play on one of the computers, and a man named Dr. John Renard, head of the US military project THEM, speaks. He reveals that in 1951, a meteor brought alien creatures to Earth. The US contained the creatures and kept them for testing and experimentation. Using a piece of the original alien DNA, scientists spliced their DNA from fire ants and spiders to create the giant creatures for military research purposes. But one day, due to a security breach, the Batch 9 broke free and killed all private security forces. Moreover, 12 scientists have gone missing and are presumed dead. Dr. Renard speculates that after feeding, the Batch 9 will attempt to make a colony somewhere dark and cool where the queen ant can lay eggs. He also reveals that the ants require ethanol to fertilize the eggs. Lisa suddenly realizes that their desert party has an endless supply of ethanol, aka alcohol, and the trio quickly head to the party to warn the others. However, the army of ants reaches the party before them and launches an attack, sending everyone into a frenzy. Tim and Craig quickly hop on their bikes and proceed to flee, while others become victims of the ants one by one. A small group of ants follows the Guarisco brothers and manages to trip Craig and capture him, while Tim helplessly drives away. Brian and his friends finally arrive and learn that the ants have already wreaked havoc at the party. They decide to head to the town, but as soon as they get on their trucks, they come under attack by an ant. They freak out and get on 2 bikes and drive away. They split up to trick the ants, and Brian heads towards the chasm with Lisa, planning to jump over the fissure. This might be the wrong time for Brian to try a stunt. However, Lisa tells him that he can't make it to the other side and trips the bike over to stop him. Brian gets upset that she feels he can't jump over the chasm because she probably thinks that Lucas can. Lisa corrects him and tells him that Lucas can't make it to the other side either. Brian tells her that Lucas would at least try. Lisa agrees, but tells him that's why she thinks Lucas is an idiot. She reminds Brian that just because they are in a dire situation doesn't mean he has to do anything reckless. I guess Lisa doesn't know that she's in an action movie. She tells him that he is smarter than that, and that's why she likes him. Brian is taken aback by the confession and gets lost in his thoughts. Meanwhile, an ant quietly takes Lisa away. Brian snaps out of his dreams, and Lucas arrives. The two follow the ant to the Star Caves. Deep inside the caves, they come across giant glowing ant eggs. They also find Lisa and their friends from the party wrapped alive inside silk cocoons. Suddenly, an ant shows up, but Dr. Renard appears from behind and kills it. The scientist tells them that they must leave immediately before the other ants return. Brian refuses to leave without Lisa, but Dr. Renard tells him that they can't open the cocoon without special tools. Lucas tells his friend that if they all die, no one will be able to save Lisa, and Brian finally agrees to leave, but not before promising Lisa that he will return to get her. As they head towards the facility to fetch tools required to rescue Lisa and the others on foot, Dr. Renard warns them that automated sentry guns protecting the facility must have been activated after the release of his SOS video. He also shows them a map containing the locations of the sentry guns around the facility. He further reveals that the ants will start looking for other sources of prey, i.e. the nearest town, which leaves the trio with 30 minutes to act. Halfway to the facility, an ant appears from behind and impales the scientist. Horrified, Brian and Lucas run away and enter the facility from the back to avoid getting shelled by machine guns. Passing through the hallway, they come across a giant gate inside the chamber, but fail to open it. Dejected, they proceed to return, only to find an ant feeding on a corpse in the hallway, forcing them back into the chamber. Lucas suggests calling the authorities, but Brian fears that the government could nuke the town to stop the scourge. With no other choice left, they decide to take on the ant. Lucas first decides to drink a beer in case he dies, and grabs a beer can from the refrigerator in the adjoining room. But to their astonishment, it opens the gate. Inside, they find a smart rifle, plasma bolt cutter, and combat suits. Fully equipped, they neutralize the ant outside and head to the Star Caves in bikes parked outside. Brian quietly frees Lisa and then lures the ants outside the cave. To give Lucas freedom to free other people and destroy the ant eggs, Brian leads the ants to the facility, setting them up to get shelled by the automatic machine guns. The plan works, and they celebrate, but only to realize that the queen ant is still alive and watching over them from above. Fearing for their lives, they drive towards the chasm, followed closely by the ant. Brian initially hesitates to jump over the fissure, but Lisa gives him some encouragement, and they successfully make it to the other side. The two then proceed to flee in Jorge's abandoned pickup truck, but the queen ant starts pulling them towards herself with silk threads. Lisa opens fire on the ant, but the ant manages to take down their truck, along with itself. The two do what Gandalf could not, and jump out of the truck and barely make it out alive. Meanwhile, after sending everyone to safety, Lucas proceeds to set the nest on fire, but an egg hatches and the baby ant attacks Lucas, accidentally setting the nest on fire in the process. Brian and Lisa arrive outside the cave to learn that Lucas is still inside. Brian proceeds to head in, but Tim stops him, telling him that Lucas saved their lives and he wouldn't want his best friend endangering his life. Craig arrives on his bike and learns that Lucas saved everyone's life but is still stuck inside. Craig, who knows that he's a useless character anyway, immediately starts his bike and heads into the cave, as Brian and the others nervously wait. The cave eventually explodes, and out comes Craig with Lucas, safe and sound. Everyone erupts into cheers and hugs each other, forgetting whatever animosity they may have had. The group returns to their party, and the Eradicator finally arrives. Brian is excited to see his idol and offers him his last beer. However, a giant ant appears from behind and snatches the beer, scaring the crap out of the hero. However, Brian, Lucas, and Lisa do not cower down and point guns at the creature. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.